Millionaire pays her debt for a baby, but after taking her virginity, he falls in love and won't let her go. Don't forget to subscribe. It's very easy. Just press the like button, hit subscribe, and leave a comment saying, "I am with Mr. Peter." Let's begin this journey together with care, kindness, and love, and make every moment meaningful as we start with love. The contract was simple: her body for 9 months, his money for a lifetime of her family's survival. But Danny Smith didn't know that claiming Jasmine's innocence would destroy the man he thought he was. Jasmine's knees threatened to buckle as she stood in the center of Danny Smith's penthouse, surrounded by windows that overlooked a city she'd never truly belonged to. The carpet beneath her worn shoes probably cost more than every piece of furniture in her grandmother's tiny apartment combined. She clutched her purse, a thrift store find with a broken clasp, and tried to steady her breathing. Danny Smith didn't look at her immediately. He stood at the window, silhouetted against the afternoon light, hands clasped behind his back. Everything about him radiated control. The sharp lines of his suit, the absolute stillness of his posture, the way the entire room seemed to bend around his presence. When he finally turned, his eyes were gray and cold as winter steel. "You understand what you're proposing?" His voice wasn't a question. Each word landed with the weight of a judge's gavel. "I do." Jasmine forced the words past the tightness in her throat. "My grandmother needs treatment. The kind your money can buy. The kind that doesn't exist in any world I can reach. And you're offering to carry a child for me in exchange." Danny moved toward his desk, each step measured. "Tell me why I should accept this arrangement when I could hire any surrogate through legitimate channels." "Because those channels ask questions you don't want to answer," Jasmine thought, but didn't say. She'd done her research. Danny Smith's late wife had been the love of his life. Everyone knew that story. She died suddenly, and the man who'd built an empire from nothing had retreated into himself. But his family, the Smiths who'd made their name across generations, demanded continuation. An heir, a legacy. "Because I'm desperate," Jasmine said instead, meeting his gaze. "And desperate people don't ask questions. They don't make demands. They take what's offered and disappear when it's done." Something flickered in Danny's expression, too quick to name. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and placed it between them. "I've had you investigated, Jasmine Walker. Raised by your grandmother after your parents died. Worked 3 jobs to keep her alive this long. No criminal record. No scandals. No complications." Jasmine's hands trembled. The clinical recitation of her life felt like being stripped naked under fluorescent lights. "Then you know I'm telling the truth. I know you're desperate enough to walk into a stranger's home and offer your womb." Danny opened the folder. "But desperation makes people unpredictable. Before I agree to anything, you'll submit to complete medical examinations, genetic testing, psychological evaluation. You'll sign documents that strip you of any parental rights. You'll sign away your ability to ever contact this child or claim any connection. Do you understand?" Each condition felt like a nail driven into her chest. Jasmine thought of her grandmother's face, the way the pain had hollowed her out, the doctors who'd stopped pretending there was hope without money she'd never possess. "I understand. The payment will be placed in an escrow account. 2 million. Half released when pregnancy is confirmed. The remainder after birth, provided you fulfill every term." Danny's fingers traced the edge of the folder. "You'll live in my estate for the duration. No contact with the outside world beyond supervised phone calls. No visitors, no independence." "That's imprisonment," Jasmine whispered. "That's protection. For the child. For my investment." Danny's eyes locked onto hers. "Take it or leave it, but decide now." "I don't waste time on indecision." Jasmine closed her eyes, saw her grandmother's smile, the way she'd raised her with nothing but love and sacrifice. Saw that smile fading in a hospital bed because the world measured life in dollars Jasmine couldn't earn fast enough. "I'll take it." Danny pushed the folder toward her. "Read every word. Sign at the bottom." The pages swam before Jasmine's eyes. Legal terminology wrapped around her throat like a noose. She signed her name 17 times. each signature feeling like she was erasing herself piece by piece. When she finished, Danny collected the papers and made a phone call. "Prepare the medical suite. Full examination. Today." He hung up and looked at Jasmine with an expression that might have been pity in a different man. "My doctor will conduct the examination here. Once we have the results, we'll proceed." The examination room made Jasmine feel like a specimen. The doctor, a woman with cold hands and colder eyes, performed tests that stripped away every shred of dignity. Jasmine stared at the ceiling and tried to remember why she was doing this. When it was over, she dressed in her cheap clothes and waited in Danny's study. He entered holding a single sheet of paper, and something in his face had changed. The coldness remained, but beneath it lurked something darker. "The results are interesting," Danny said slowly. "You're in perfect health. Ideal candidate for pregnancy. But there's one detail you failed to mention." Jasmine's stomach dropped. "What detail?" "You're a virgin." Danny placed the paper on his desk face down. Completely untouched. Heat flooded Jasmine's face. "I didn't think it mattered. It matters." Danny's voice had lowered to something almost dangerous. "Because the arrangement I proposed involved artificial insemination. Clinical, distant. No contact between us beyond what's legally required." "Then we'll do that," Jasmine said quickly. "It doesn't change anything. It changes everything." Danny moved around his desk until he stood directly in front of her. "I don't do artificial procedures. I never planned to, but I assumed I'd be dealing with a woman who understood the physical reality of what creating a child requires. Now I'm looking at someone who's never been touched by a man, offering herself up like a sacrifice." Jasmine stood, anger flooding through her fear. "You think I don't know what I'm agreeing to? You think I'm some naive girl who doesn't understand that making a baby requires sex? I know exactly what I'm offering. My body, my choice. Your money. That's the deal." "Then let me be explicitly clear about what this deal entails." Danny's face was inches from hers now. "You'll move to my private estate tomorrow. We'll spend time there, isolated, alone. And during that time, I'll take you to bed every night until pregnancy is confirmed. No clinical procedures, no artificial distance. Me inside you as many times as it takes. Is that clear enough for your understanding?" Jasmine couldn't breathe. The reality of it crashed over her like a wave. Not just pregnancy, not just carrying a child, but this man, this stranger, claiming her body, taking what she'd never given anyone. "How do I know you'll keep your word? How do I know you'll pay me after?" "You don't," Danny stepped back. "But you don't have any other options, do you? Your grandmother has limited time left, depending on which doctor's opinion you believe. You walked through my door because you're out of time and out of choices. So, I'll ask you one final time. Are you prepared to go through with this, knowing exactly what I'll demand from you?" Jasmine thought of her grandmother teaching her to read, working 3 jobs to keep her fed, sacrificing everything so Jasmine could have a future. Now it was Jasmine's turn to sacrifice. "When do we leave?" Danny pulled out his phone and made another call. "Prepare the mountain estate. They're in full staff, but no one enters the main house." He ended the call and looked at Jasmine with something that might have been respect or might have been contempt. "Tomorrow morning, bring nothing. Everything you need will be provided. My grandmother's treatment. The money transfers within the hour. Your grandmother will have the best care available. That's my guarantee. Fail to appear tomorrow, and every dollar disappears." Danny walked to the door and held it open. "A car will collect you at dawn. Don't be late." Jasmine walked past him on trembling legs. In the elevator descending from his penthouse, she caught her reflection in the polished doors. The woman staring back looked like a stranger, someone who'd just sold herself, someone who'd signed away her innocence with 17 signatures and a desperate prayer that love was worth any price. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. "Treatment approved. Beginning immediately. Your grandmother is asking for you." Jasmine pressed her forehead against the cold elevator wall and let herself cry. She'd saved her grandmother's life. But the cost was everything she'd never get back. Tomorrow, Danny Smith would take her to his mountain estate, And there, in isolation and darkness, she would give him something no amount of money could truly buy. She would give him herself and pray that when it was over, there would be enough of her left to recognize the woman in the mirror. Chapter 2. The Claiming. The mountain estate rose from the wilderness like something carved from Jasmine's nightmares and fantasies combined. Stone and glass, brutal and beautiful, perched on the edge of a cliff that dropped into endless forest. The drive had taken hours, winding up roads that erased civilization with every mile. Now she stood in the entrance hall, surrounded by silence so complete it felt like drowning. "Your room is upstairs," Danny's voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. He hadn't spoken during the entire drive. Now he gestured toward a staircase that curved upward into shadow. "Dinner is served at 8. Don't be late." Jasmine followed him up the stairs, her small overnight bag clutched in her hands. Despite his insistence, she'd need nothing. The hallway stretched before them, lined with doors that remained closed. Danny stopped at the last one and pushed it open. The room was enormous. A bed large enough to sleep 5 dominated the center, covered in white linens that looked soft as clouds. Windows overlooked the forest, and a fireplace crackled with flames that cast dancing shadows across the walls. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "The bathroom is through there," Danny pointed to a side door. "Clothes in the closet, all your size. Toiletries provided. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed." "Where's your room?" Jasmine asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Across the hall." Danny's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something human in them. Uncertainty, maybe, or dread. "We have hours before dinner. Rest. This won't be easy for either of us." He left, closing the door with a soft click. Jasmine stood in the center of the room and tried to remember how to breathe. This was real. She was here. And tonight the agreement would begin. She showered in the bathroom, which was all marble and gold fixtures, water so hot it turned her skin pink. The clothes in the closet fit perfectly, and she wondered how he'd known her exact measurements. Probably the same way he'd known everything else about her life. Money brought answers to any question. Dinner was a strange, silent affair. They sat at opposite ends of a table that could have seated 20. Plates of food neither of them touched. Jasmine tried to eat, but every bite tasted like ash. Danny drank wine and watched her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Are you afraid of me?" he finally asked. Jasmine set down her fork. "Should I be? I don't hurt women. Despite what you might think of this arrangement, despite the coldness of the contract, I'm not a monster." Danny refilled his glass. "But I am taking something from you that you can never get back. So yes, maybe you should be afraid." "I'm not afraid of pain," Jasmine said quietly. "I'm afraid of disappearing, of giving you so much of myself that there's nothing left when this is over." Danny's hand tightened around his glass. "Then we're both afraid of the same thing." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Jasmine didn't dare examine. They finished dinner in silence, and when it was over, Danny stood. "It's time." Jasmine's heart hammered against her ribs. She followed him up the stairs, each step feeling like walking toward an execution. When they reached his room, larger than hers, darker, dominated by a bed that looked like an altar, Danny turned to her. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "Walk away now, and I'll still pay for your grandmother's treatment. No strings, no obligations." Jasmine looked at this man who'd bought her future, who was about to claim her body, who stood before her offering an escape she couldn't take. Why would you do that? Because taking a woman's virginity should mean something more than a business transaction. Danny's voice cracked slightly. "Because I'm about to cross a line I never thought I'd cross, and maybe giving you an escape makes me less of a bastard for it." "I'm not leaving," Jasmine whispered. "I made a choice. I'm staying." Danny nodded slowly. Then he crossed the space between them and cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, and it made everything worse, because she'd expected coldness and instead found something that felt dangerously like tenderness. "I'll try to make it hurt as little as possible," he said. Then he kissed her, and Jasmine's world tilted sideways. His lips were soft and demanding simultaneously, coaxing responses from her body she didn't know existed. When he pulled back, her knees had gone weak. Danny undressed her slowly, peeling away layers until she stood naked before him, exposed in every possible way. His eyes traveled over her body, and shame flooded through her until he whispered, "You're beautiful, painfully beautiful." He laid her on the bed, and his hands explored her with a thoroughness that felt like worship and violation combined. When he finally positioned himself above her, Jasmine closed her eyes and tried to remember why she was here. Her grandmother, love, sacrifice. "Look at me," Danny commanded. "If we're doing this, you look at me." Jasmine opened her eyes and met his gaze. In that moment, she saw past the coldness to something raw and broken underneath. A man who'd lost everything and was trying to claw his way back to life through an act that would destroy them both. When he entered her, the pain was sharp and immediate. Jasmine cried out, tears streaming down her face, and Danny froze. "Breathe," he whispered. "Just breathe through it." But the tears weren't just from physical pain. They came from the devastating intimacy of this moment, the way her body was being claimed by a stranger who felt less like a stranger with every second. When he began to move, the pain transformed into something else. Not pleasure, not yet, but a connection so intense it felt like drowning. Danny moved slowly, carefully, his forehead pressed against hers. "I'm sorry," he kept whispering. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." When it was over, Jasmine lay in his bed, blood on the white sheets, body aching in places she'd never acknowledged. Danny pulled her into his arms, holding her with a possessiveness that should have frightened her, but instead felt like the only solid thing in a tilting world. "Stay tonight," he said against her hair. "Don't go back to your room." Jasmine wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some distance, some separation between the transaction and whatever this was becoming. But she was too exhausted, too overwhelmed, too broken open. She stayed. The days stretched into nights that blurred together. Danny took her again, and each time the pain lessened and something else emerged. Her body learned his rhythms, her skin memorized his touch, her breath synchronized with his. They barely spoke during the day, moving around each other like ghosts. But at night, in that bed, they communicated in a language that had no words. By the time they'd been there longer than originally planned, something had fundamentally shifted. Danny made love to her with a desperation that felt like grief, and Jasmine responded with an abandon that terrified her. When she climaxed for the first time, Danny held her through the shaking and whispered things she pretended not to hear. The pregnancy test came back positive one morning. They stood in the bathroom, staring at the 2 pink lines that meant the transaction was complete. Danny's face was unreadable. "It's done," he said finally. "Yes." Jasmine's hand unconsciously moved to her still flat stomach. "It's done." They'd returned to the city that afternoon. The drive back felt like traveling between 2 different worlds. The mountain estate, where something raw and real had happened, and the city where contracts and coldness ruled. When they arrived at Danny's mansion, he led her to a wing she'd never seen. "Your quarters," he said, opening a door to a suite of rooms. "Everything you need. Private entrance. You won't have to see me unless necessary." Jasmine looked at this beautiful cage he was offering. "What about at night?" Danny's jaw tightened. "What happened at the estate stays there. We're back to the original agreement now. You're carrying my child. I'll provide everything you need, but we maintain appropriate distance." "Distance," Jasmine repeated, the word tasting bitter. "After everything." "Especially after everything." Danny's voice turned cold, the warmth she'd glimpsed at the estate vanishing like it had never existed. "What happened was necessary for conception. Nothing more. Don't confuse physical intimacy with emotional connection." He left her standing in the doorway of her new prison, and Jasmine felt something inside her crack. She'd known this was temporary, known it was a transaction, But somewhere in those mountain nights, she'd started believing the tenderness was real. Started thinking maybe the man who held her like she was precious actually saw her as more than a womb he'd rented. That night, she lay alone in the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling. Across the mansion, Danny did the same. Neither of them slept. But what Jasmine didn't know, what she couldn't see, was that Danny sat outside her door until dawn, head in his hands, fighting the urge to go to her. Because he'd felt everything she had, felt it and was terrified by it. And the only way he knew to protect himself was to build walls so high and so thick that nothing could penetrate them. Not even the woman carrying his child. The woman who'd given him everything. The woman he was already falling in love with and didn't know how to stop. Chapter 3. The Fracture. Jasmine's body changed in small, undeniable ways. Her breasts grew tender. Food tasted different. Some things she'd loved now made her nauseous, while cravings struck at odd hours for combinations that made no sense. The mansion staff catered to her every whim with silent efficiency, but their eyes held something that made her skin crawl. Pity, maybe, or judgment. She couldn't tell which was worse. Danny became a ghost in his own house. She'd see him sometimes, early in the morning before he left or late at night when he returned. They'd pass in hallways, and his eyes would flicker to her stomach, still flat, still hiding the life growing inside, before he'd nod and continue walking. No words, no acknowledgement of what they'd shared. The loneliness ate at her like acid. The morning Danny's mother arrived, Jasmine woke to raised voices echoing through the mansion. She pulled on a robe and ventured into the hallway, drawn by the sharp crack of Patricia Smith's voice, cutting through the air like a whip. "You brought that woman into our home. Our family home." Patricia stood in the foyer, dripping wealth and contempt in equal measure. Her suit probably cost more than Jasmine's grandmother's entire year of treatment. "Have you lost your mind?" "Mother." Danny's voice was controlled, but Jasmine heard the warning underneath. "This doesn't concern you. Everything about this family concerns me. Your father built our name. You've maintained it. And now you're throwing it away on some—" Patricia's eyes landed on Jasmine at the top of the stairs. "Some desperate girl who spread her legs for money." The words hit Jasmine like physical blows. She gripped the railing, trying to steady herself. "That's enough." Danny's tone dropped to something dangerous. "Is it?" Patricia smiled, cold and sharp. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you honestly believe you could hide this sordid arrangement?" "I know everything, Danny. The contract, the payment. The fact that you bought a womb like purchasing a car." Jasmine descended the stairs on trembling legs. "Mrs. Smith, don't address me." Patricia's eyes raked over Jasmine with open disgust. "You have no right to speak to me. You're nothing but a transaction, a temporary inconvenience." "Mother, I won't warn you again." Danny moved between them, but his body language was stiff, formal. He didn't defend Jasmine, didn't call his mother's cruelty what it was. Patricia laughed, bitter and harsh. "What will you do, Danny?" "Throw me out!" "I'm your mother. I earned my place in this family through sacrifice and loyalty. She's earned nothing but a paycheck for services rendered." Jasmine felt the blood drain from her face. Patricia's words crystallized something she'd been trying not to acknowledge. She truly was nothing here. A womb they'd rented, temporary importance with an expiration date. "I'll leave you to your family discussion," Jasmine said quietly, turning back toward the stairs. "Yes, run along," Patricia called after her. "Stay in your quarters where you belong. That's what we're paying you for, after all. To disappear." Jasmine made it to her room before the tears came. She collapsed on the bed and sobbed into her pillow, trying to muffle the sounds. The baby inside her was barely formed, just cells multiplying in darkness, but already she loved it with a ferocity that terrified her. This child was half hers, half her blood, her DNA, her everything, and they were going to take it from her like it had never mattered at all. Hours later, a knock on her door made her sit up. Danny entered without waiting for permission, his face carved from stone. My mother will not bother you again, he said. Will she? Jasmine's voice was hoarse from crying, because it seemed like she had a lot to say, and you didn't exactly shut her down. I handled it in my own way. By standing there silently while she called me a whore, Jasmine stood, anger flooding through her grief. By letting her make it clear that I'm nothing but a transaction. That's how you handled it? Danny's jaw tightened. You knew what this was from the beginning. You signed the papers. You agreed to every term. Don't suddenly develop romantic notions about your place here. Romantic notions? Jasmine's laugh was sharp enough to cut. I'm carrying your child. Your baby's growing inside my body. And you treat me like I'm a piece of furniture. You're being paid extremely well for your inconvenience. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. Jasmine felt something inside her die. Get out! Jasmine, get out! She grabbed the nearest object, a decorative pillow, and threw it at him. Get out of my room and don't come back unless you're prepared to see me as a human being instead of a womb you purchased. Danny left without another word. But that night, the security camera in Jasmine's room recorded something the guards would never report. Danny Smith, sitting in the chair outside her door, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Inside the room, Jasmine pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered to the baby she was already afraid of loving too much. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're being born into this. I'm sorry your father is so broken he doesn't know how to be human anymore. The following weeks brought a new torture. Patricia Smith became a constant presence in the mansion, her cruelty taking on subtle forms that left no evidence. Comments about Jasmine's weight gain, her appearance, her education, suggestions that perhaps they should hire someone more suitable for carrying such an important child. Reminders that Jasmine was temporary, replaceable, ultimately irrelevant. And Danny said nothing, did nothing, maintained his cold distance like ice that never melted. Jasmine endured because she had no choice. The money was already spent on her grandmother's treatment. The contract gave her no escape. She was trapped in luxury, drowning in designer prison. But late at night, she'd hear sounds from the library below her room. Crashes, breaking glass, the destruction of a man falling apart in private while maintaining his frozen facade in public. She'd lie in bed listening and wonder which version of Danny Smith was real. The cold businessman who treated her like property, or the broken man who destroyed his library in the darkness. One night, unable to bear the sounds of destruction, Jasmine crept downstairs. She found Danny surrounded by shattered glass, holding an ultrasound photo she'd left in the study. He was drunk, swaying slightly, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. I can't stop seeing it, he whispered when he noticed her. Can't stop seeing you bleeding on those white sheets. Can't stop remembering how you cried and I kept taking you anyway. Can't stop feeling like I destroyed something sacred and called it a business deal. Jasmine stood frozen in the doorway. Now, Danny, go back upstairs. His voice turned harsh, desperate. Go back to your room and lock the door and forget you saw this. Forget all of it. Forget I'm human underneath the ice. I can't forget. Jasmine moved closer, careful of the broken glass. I can't forget any of it even though I want to. Even though remembering hurts. Danny looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since they'd returned from the mountain estate. His hand reached out, trembling, and touched her stomach where the baby grew. I'm going to lose you both, he whispered. Going to push you away until you hate me, because I don't know how else to protect myself from caring. From caring. Jasmine's heart hammered. You care? Danny pulled his hand back like she'd burned him. Get out! This conversation is over. But as Jasmine walked back to her room, she knew something had shifted. Danny wasn't as cold as he pretended. He was terrified. And a terrified man was infinitely more dangerous than a cold one, because fear made people do desperate things. She just didn't know yet how desperate Danny would become. Didn't know that his fear of losing her would lead him to build cages, disguised as protection. Didn't know that love, twisted by fear and control, could become its own kind of prison. The baby kicked for the first time the next morning. A flutter so faint, Jasmine almost missed it. She pressed her hand to her stomach and felt tears streaming down her face. This child would be born into a war between people who didn't know how to love without destroying. And Jasmine had no idea how to protect any of them from the devastation coming. Chapter 4. Leo. The labor came early, violent and sudden. Jasmine woke at dawn to pain that felt like her body was being torn in half. The contractions hit fast, leaving no time for preparation. She managed to press the emergency button by her bed before collapsing to the floor, gasping through waves of agony that stole her breath. Danny appeared in seconds, still in pajamas, eyes wild with panic. "What's happening?" Baby, Jasmine could barely form words. Coming too early." Danny scooped her into his arms like she weighed nothing and ran. No waiting for staff, no calling for help, just raw panic driving him toward the garage. He laid her across the back seat of his car and drove like a madman, one hand on the wheel and one reaching back to grip hers. "Stay with me," he kept saying. "Jasmine, stay with me. Don't you dare leave me." The hospital was chaos. Nurses swarmed, machines beeped, voices shouted medical terminology Jasmine couldn't process through the pain. They wheeled her toward an operating room, and Danny tried to follow. "Family only," someone said. "I'm the father." Danny's voice cracked with desperation. "That's my baby. They let him in." Jasmine would remember that later, how he'd called her his, how he'd looked at her like losing her would end him. But in the moment she could only focus on surviving. The baby emerged too small, too fragile, barely crying. They whisked him away immediately, and Jasmine reached for him with arms that felt too weak to hold anything. "My baby, let me see my baby. He needs immediate intervention," a doctor said. "He's too premature. We need to stabilize." Then the bleeding started. Jasmine felt it, warm and wrong, and saw the terror bloom on the medical staff's faces. Someone shouted about hemorrhaging. Someone else barked orders. Danny's face appeared above hers, pale as death. "If you die," he whispered, "the money means nothing. The baby means nothing. Just live. Do you hear me? You live." Jasmine wanted to answer, wanted to tell him she was trying, but darkness pulled her under before she could form the words. She woke to pain and harsh lights. Her body felt wrong, empty and aching in ways that went beyond physical. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why everything hurt. Then memory crashed back. "My baby. Where's my baby?" "He's alive." Danny appeared beside her bed, looking like he'd aged years overnight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His clothes were rumpled, stained with blood, her blood. "Leo. They're calling him Leo. He's in the neonatal unit. Too small, but fighting." "Leo," Jasmine repeated, and tears streamed down her face. "I want to see him." "You can't. Not yet." "You almost died, Jasmine. The bleeding, they couldn't stop it. They had to perform emergency procedures. They said," Danny's voice broke, "they said you'll never have another child. The damage was too severe." The words didn't register immediately. Then they hit like a physical blow. Never have another child. This baby, this tiny premature boy fighting for life in another room, would be her only child. Ever. "The contract," Jasmine whispered. "The contract says I leave after nursing him." "Forget the contract." Danny gripped her hand with both of his, and she saw tears in his eyes. "You stay as long as he needs you. As long as just stay." The days blurred together. Jasmine recovered slowly, her body knitting itself back together in painful increments. When they finally let her see Leo, she broke down completely. He was so tiny, hooked up to machines, his little chest rising and falling too fast. She pressed her hand against the plastic incubator and sobbed. "He's strong," a nurse said gently. "He's fighting hard." Jasmine spent every possible moment in the neonatal unit, talking to Leo, singing to him, willing him to survive. Danny was always there too, standing in the corner watching, not touching, not speaking, just watching with an intensity that made Jasmine's skin prickle. When Leo finally came home, the mansion transformed. Nurses appeared, specialists, equipment that turned the wing near Jasmine's room into a miniature hospital. Danny supervised everything with manic attention to detail, micromanaging every aspect of Leo's care, but he wouldn't let Jasmine out of his sight. "I need to take Leo for a walk," she'd say, and Danny would insist on accompanying them. The pediatrician recommended a different formula, she'd mention, and Danny would appear with alternatives before she'd finish speaking. When she tried to hire a night nurse so she could get some sleep, Danny fired the woman before she'd worked a single shift. "I can't do this without you," Jasmine finally exploded one evening, exhausted and overwhelmed. "You're smothering me. You're controlling every single decision. He's my baby too." "Our baby," Danny corrected, voice tight. "Our baby who almost killed you. Our baby who's still fragile. I'm protecting him. You're imprisoning me." Jasmine held Leo closer, the baby squirming against her chest. "I can't breathe in this house, Danny. I can't make a single choice without you overruling it. This isn't protection. This is control. According to our contract, you're supposed to leave." Danny's expression hardened. "After nursing him. That was the agreement. But I'm offering you more. A place in his life. More money. Whatever you need. Just stay." "I was always going to stay," Jasmine said quietly. "From the moment I felt him move inside me, I knew I couldn't leave." "I don't need your money to stay. I need you to trust me with my own child." "He's not just your child." Danny's voice dropped to something dangerous. "He's mine. And everything you are, everything you have, I gave you. Don't forget who holds the power here." The words hit like poison. Jasmine looked at this man who'd held her while she bled, who'd begged her to live, who'd shown her glimpses of humanity. "You're destroying what little was left between us." "There was never anything between us," Danny said coldly. "You carry my child. That's the extent of our relationship." But that night, Jasmine woke to find Danny standing over Leo's crib, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he was whispering to their sleeping son. "I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to love without destroying. Don't know how to let her go or how to keep her. I'm sorry you got me as a father. You deserved better." Jasmine pretended to sleep, but her heart shattered hearing him. Danny was trapped in his own prison, built from fear and control, an inability to trust. And she was trapped with him, bound by love for their child and the aching, broken connection between them. When Leo's birthday approached, Jasmine planned a small celebration. Just the three of them, cake and balloons, simple joy. She wanted Leo to have happy memories, even if everything else was complicated. The day before the party, she went to visit her grandmother, who'd been moved to a beautiful facility where she thrived. Jasmine brought Leo, showed him off, felt her grandmother's tears of joy. "You did good, baby girl," her grandmother whispered. "That boy is loved. That's what matters." But when Jasmine returned to the mansion, Danny was waiting with an expression that made her stomach drop. "We need to talk," he said. He led her to his study and closed the door. "I need to confess something. Your grandmother's treatment finished some time ago. She's been healthy and stable. The facility has been reporting that she still needs you close, still needs your presence for her recovery." "They've been lying." Jasmine felt the room tilt. "What?" "I've been paying them to lie." Danny's face was carved from stone. "To make you think you needed to stay nearby. To give you another reason not to leave. Jasmine couldn't form words through the rage flooding her system. "You manipulated me. You lied. You trapped me here with manufactured necessity." "Yes," Danny didn't flinch. "I did all of that because I couldn't bear the thought of you walking away." Jasmine looked at this man who'd bought her, controlled her, manipulated her at every turn. "I hate you," she whispered. "I hate you so much I can't breathe through it." "I know." Danny's voice was hollow. "But you're still here, and that's all that matters." Jasmine left the study and went to Leo's room, where their son slept peacefully. She looked at this child she'd created, with a man she couldn't escape, and felt the weight of her prison settling over her shoulders. She was trapped, completely and utterly trapped, because leaving meant abandoning Leo to Danny's broken love, and staying meant destroying herself piece by piece. There was no good choice. There was only survival, and tomorrow was Leo's birthday. She'd smile and sing and pretend everything was fine, because that's what mothers did. They sacrificed. They endured. They loved even when love felt like drowning. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. Jasmine discovered the truth in a file left carelessly on Danny's desk. She hadn't been snooping. Leo had crawled into the study, and she'd followed to retrieve him. The folder was open, medical reports clearly visible, her grandmother's name at the top, the date of her final clearance, proof of Danny's deception laid out in clinical black and white. But underneath those documents lay something worse. Legal papers. Custody arrangements drafted by expensive lawyers. Every possible contingency covered. Every loophole closed. The documents painted a clear picture. Jasmine had no legal rights to Leo whatsoever. The contract she'd signed had been airtight. In the eyes of the law, she was a surrogate who'd been generously allowed to stay beyond her obligations. She could walk away any time. But Leo would remain with Danny. Jasmine gathered the documents with shaking hands and waited in the study. When Danny returned from wherever he'd been, she threw the folder at his chest. "Explain this." Her voice was deadly calm. "Explain every word of this." Danny glanced at the scattered papers and had the decency to look caught. But his expression quickly hardened into the businessman's mask she'd come to despise. "You weren't supposed to see those, but I did see them. All of it. The lies about my grandmother. The legal documents proving I have zero rights to my own child. The custody arrangements. You've built a cage so perfect I can't even see the bars." Jasmine's hands clenched into fists. "When were you going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying forever? I fell in love with you." Danny's words came out harsh, defensive. "The first night I touched you, when you bled and cried and still looked at me like I was human, I fell so completely it terrified me. Everything since has been me trying to keep you without admitting I need you more than you need this money. You don't get to call this love." Jasmine's voice rose to a shout. "Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't trap. Love doesn't build cages and call them protection. You took my choice, Danny. You took my freedom. You took everything and wrapped it in pretty words and told me it was for my own good." "I gave you everything," Danny countered, his own voice rising. "Your grandmother's life, this house, safety, comfort, Leo, growing up with both parents. What more do you want?" "I want autonomy. I want respect. I want to be seen as a human being instead of a possession." Jasmine grabbed Leo, who'd started crying at the raised voices. "I want to leave with my son and build a life that isn't poisoned by your control. Leo stays here." Danny's voice dropped to something cold and final. "Every document you signed ensures it. You can walk away today, right now, and I won't stop you. But Leo remains in this house in my custody, under my care." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jasmine looked at her son, his little face scrunched with confusion and tears, and felt her world crumble. "You'd really do that? You'd really take him from me? I'd die before I let you take him from me." Danny's face was granite. "He's all I have. The only good thing I've ever created. You can hate me, despise me, wish me dead, but you're not taking my son. He's my son too." Jasmine's voice cracked. "I carried him. I almost died bringing him into this world. My body will never be the same, and you're telling me I have no rights? The law is clear. You signed away your rights. You agreed to be a surrogate, that you've been allowed to stay, to act as his mother, to be part of his life. That's my generosity, not your right." Danny moved toward her and she backed away. "I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it so you understand the reality. You have no legal leg to stand on." Jasmine felt something inside her break completely. Not crack. Not fracture. Shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. "Then I'm trapped. Forever trapped. Because I can't leave Leo, and I can't stay with you without destroying myself. Then maybe you need to decide which you value more." Danny's words were cruel and precise. "Your freedom or your son?" Jasmine looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man so broken by loss and fear that he'd become the very thing he claimed to fear. a monster wearing the face of love. "You won't win," she whispered. "Even if you keep us here, even if you trap us forever, you'll never have what you actually want. You'll never have my love. You'll never have a real family. You'll have prisoners who hate you. Then I'll have that." Danny's jaw tightened. "Because having you here and hating me is better than losing you completely." Jasmine left the study with Leo clutched to her chest. She went to her room, locked the door, and made a decision. If she couldn't leave physically, she'd leave emotionally. She'd amputate Danny from her heart like cutting out a cancer. She'd stay for Leo, give him all the love she possessed, but Danny would get nothing. Not her words, not her smiles, not her presence unless absolutely necessary. He wanted to trap her. Fine, but he'd be trapping a ghost. That night, Jasmine moved into Leo's nursery. She set up a mattress on the floor, surrounded herself with her son's things, and refused to return to her original room. When Danny knocked, she didn't answer. When he called through the door, she stayed silent. The next morning, she emerged only to care for Leo. She moved through the mansion like a shadow, speaking only when necessary, making eye contact with no one. At meals, she fed Leo and left before Danny could join them. During the day, she kept to Leo's schedule, playing and reading and singing with forced cheer while her heart turned to stone. Danny tried everything. Apologies she ignored, gifts she left unopened. Attempts at conversation she met with silence. He'd stand in doorways, watching her with desperate eyes, and she'd look through him like he was made of glass. "Talk to me," he'd beg. "Scream at me. Hate me out loud. Just stop this silence." But Jasmine had learned that silence was power. Words gave him something to work with, something to manipulate. Silence left him helpless, grasping at air. Time passed. The mansion became a mausoleum where 3 people existed without truly living. Leo thrived despite the tension, growing and laughing and learning. But when Danny tried to play with him, Leo would cry and reach for Jasmine. The baby sensed the fracture between his parents and chose the one who felt safe. Danny's face grew hollow. His clothes hung looser. At night, Jasmine would hear him pacing the hallways, pausing outside the nursery door but never entering. One evening, she found him collapsed in the library, surrounded by broken bottles and shattered glass. He was drunk beyond coherent speech, tears streaming down his face, looking like the broken man she'd glimpsed once on a mountain estate before everything went wrong. "I've destroyed everything," he slurred. "Everything I touch turns to ash. My wife died. My mother became a stranger. And you, God, you were the one good thing I didn't deserve, and I crushed you trying to hold on too tight." Jasmine stood in the doorway holding Leo, watching this man fall apart. Part of her wanted to comfort him. Part of her wanted to twist the knife deeper. But mostly she felt empty, hollowed out, dead inside except for the love she reserved solely for her son. "You did this to yourself," she said quietly. "Every choice, every manipulation, every lie. You built this cage for both of us, and now you're trapped in here too." Danny looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I know, God, I know. And I don't know how to fix it. Don't know how to give you freedom without losing you. Don't know how to be anything but this broken, controlling bastard. Then maybe you need to learn." Jasmine adjusted Leo on her hip. "Maybe you need to figure out who you are when you're not building cages." She left him there in the wreckage of his self-destruction. But something had shifted. Danny had admitted his brokenness out loud, and admissions were the first step toward change. Jasmine didn't know if change was possible, didn't know if she could ever forgive or forget. But for the first time since discovering his betrayal, she felt something other than rage and despair. She felt the smallest, most fragile possibility of hope, and that terrified her more than anything else. Chapter 6. The Cold War. Jasmine perfected the art of existing in Danny's space without acknowledging his presence. She moved through rooms like water, flowing around him, never touching, never engaging. When he entered, she'd leave. When he spoke, she'd hum to Leo. When he tried to help with their son, She'd intercept with practiced efficiency, creating an invisible wall he couldn't penetrate. Danny's mother, Patricia, sensed the weakness and struck. The legal documents arrived on a morning when spring rain hammered against the windows. Jasmine found them slipped under the nursery door, official and threatening. Patricia was filing for custody of Leo, claiming Jasmine was mentally unstable and an unfit mother. The document cited her isolation, her refusal to engage with Danny, her concerning behavior of sleeping in the nursery instead of her own room. Jasmine's hand shook as she read. They had testimonies from staff members Patricia had obviously paid, psychiatric evaluations she'd never undergone. A picture painted of a woman on the edge of breakdown, dangerous to her own child. She found Danny in his home office looking gaunt and exhausted. She threw the papers on his desk without a word. Danny read them and something dark crossed his face. She won't succeed. Won't she? Jasmine's voice was flat. She has evidence, staff testimonies. I've been acting strange, Danny. We both know it. You've been acting like a woman trapped in an impossible situation. Danny stood, and for the first time in a long while, she saw fury in his expression, fury directed at someone other than himself. My mother has crossed a line she can't come back from. What are you going to do? Destroy her case, and then cut her from our lives permanently. Danny picked up his phone. She touches you or Leo, and she's dead to me. Jasmine watched him make calls, his voice cold and precise as he dismantled his mother's attack piece by piece. Within hours, Patricia's lawyers were withdrawing the petition. By evening, Danny had removed her from every family trust, every board position, every connection to the Smith empire. When Patricia arrived at the mansion, screaming and threatening, Danny met her at the door. "You're no longer welcome here," he said simply. "You attempted to take my son from his mother. That's unforgivable." "I was trying to protect him from that woman." Patricia's face was twisted with rage. "She's not stable. She's not one of us. She's Leo's mother, and she's more family to me than you've ever been." Danny's voice was ice. "You have 1 hour to remove your personal items from the guest house. After that, security will escort you off the property. If you attempt to contact me, Jasmine, or Leo again, I'll file a restraining order." Patricia's mouth opened and closed, disbelief and fury warring on her face. "I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother the moment you threatened my family." Danny closed the door in her face. Jasmine had watched the entire exchange from the stairs. When Danny turned and saw her, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. He'd finally protected her, finally chosen her over his mother's cruelty. "Thank you," Jasmine said quietly. "It's not enough." Danny's voice was rough. "It's not nearly enough to make up for letting her hurt you, but it's a start." Jasmine nodded and retreated to the nursery. But that night, when she heard Danny's footsteps pause outside the door, she didn't lock it. Didn't invite him in, but didn't shut him out completely either. Progress, tiny and fragile, but progress nonetheless. The weeks following Patricia's banishment brought subtle changes. Danny stopped trying to force interactions and instead focused on Leo. He'd leave gifts for their son, with notes attached, for Leo, from Dad, never pressuring Jasmine, never overstepping, just consistently showing up. He started therapy. Jasmine knew because she'd see the virtual sessions through his office door he'd started leaving open. She'd hear him talking about control issues, fear of abandonment, the way his wife's death had broken something fundamental in him. "I don't know how to love without trying to possess," she heard him say once. "I don't know the difference between protection and imprisonment." "Ah, then learn," his therapist responded. "Love requires letting go, even when letting go terrifies you." Jasmine found herself listening more than she wanted to admit, found herself softening in ways that felt dangerous. One afternoon, Leo took his first real steps, not just the stumbling toddle, but actual walking. He'd been playing near Jasmine when he suddenly stood up and walked toward the window where Danny stood outside, arriving home from somewhere. "Danny!" Jasmine called before she could stop herself. "Danny, come quick!" Danny burst through the door, and Leo turned, saw his father, and walked toward him with arms outstretched. Danny dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face as Leo reached him. "That's my boy," Danny whispered, gathering Leo into his arms. "That's my beautiful boy." Jasmine watched them, father and son, and felt something crack in her carefully maintained armor. Leo needed his father, needed Danny's love, flawed and broken as it was, and she was keeping them apart with her silence. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Jasmine knocked on Danny's office door. He looked up, surprise and hope warring on his face. "Can we talk?" she asked. Danny stood immediately. "Yes, always, anything." They sat in the library, the scene of so much destruction and confrontation. Jasmine chose her words carefully. "I can't forgive you yet. Maybe not for years. Maybe never completely. But I can't keep Leo from his father either. It's not fair to him." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to find a new arrangement, something that works for all three of us. Not the cage you built, not the silence I've been maintaining. Something different." Jasmine looked at her hands. "You need to move out of the main house. Give me space. Give me autonomy. Prove that you can let go without trying to control." Danny's face went pale. "Move out?" "Not far. The guest house is empty now. You can still see Leo every day, but I need distance, need to breathe." Jasmine met his eyes. "This is non-negotiable. Either you give me this space, or I'll find lawyers who can get me out of this contract." "You'd really leave?" Danny's voice was hollow. "Take Leo and go?" "I'd fight with everything I have. I'd lose, probably, but I'd fight." Jasmine stood. "Or you could choose to let me stay by giving me the freedom to choose to stay. Your move, Danny." She left him there, not knowing what he'd decide. Part of her expected him to refuse, to double down on control, to prove that people like him never really changed. The next morning, she woke to sounds of movement. She went to the window and saw Danny directing movers, his belongings being transferred to the guest house across the property. He was doing it, actually doing it. When he was done, he came to the nursery where Jasmine sat feeding Leo breakfast. "I'm moved out. The guest house is mine. You have the main house. Total privacy. I won't enter unless you invite me. I'll see Leo when you allow it. Is that acceptable?" Jasmine searched his face for manipulation, for angles, for the trap she was certain had to be there. But she saw only exhaustion and desperate hope. "That's acceptable." "Okay, then." Danny looked at Leo, drinking from his bottle, completely oblivious to the momentous shift happening. "Can I say goodbye to him?" "You can." Jasmine handed Leo to him and watched father and son embrace. Danny whispered something in Leo's ear, kissed his forehead, and handed him back. "I'll prove I've changed," Danny said at the door. "Every single day I'll prove it." Then he left, actually left, gave her space without conditions or control. Jasmine stood in the center of the mansion that suddenly felt enormous and empty. She'd won. She'd demanded freedom and received it. So why did she feel so hollow? Because part of her had wanted him to fight harder. Part of her had wanted him to choose possession over letting go. Part of her was terrified that now that he'd given her freedom, he'd also give up on her completely. She looked down at Leo, who reached toward the window where Danny's silhouette disappeared into the guest house. "Da-da," Leo said clearly. "Yes," Jasmine whispered. "Da-da. And he's learning to love us the right way. We just have to decide if we're brave enough to let him. Chapter 7. The Unraveling. Danny kept his word with painful precision. He'd arrive at the main house each morning, knock on the door, and wait for Jasmine to invite him in. Some mornings she did, some mornings she didn't. On the days she refused him entry, he'd sit on the front steps for an hour anyway, just being close to where Leo was, before leaving for wherever he spent his days. Jasmine watched this ritual, through the windows, trying to harden her heart against it. But watching Danny sit on cold stone, shoulders hunched, waiting for scraps of time with his son, it broke something in her daily. He never complained, never demanded, never reverted to his old controlling ways. When she allowed him time with Leo, he was present and gentle, teaching their son patty cake and singing off-key lullabies. When his hour was up, he'd leave without protest, even when Leo cried for him to stay. "You're torturing him," one of the house staff said quietly one morning. A woman named Ruth, who'd been kind to Jasmine from the beginning. "I'm not saying you don't have the right. Lord knows that man earned every bit of your anger. But watching him break himself, trying to prove he's changed, it's hard to witness." "He broke me first," Jasmine replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "He did. And now you're both broken. And that baby in there deserves parents who've healed." Ruth touched Jasmine's shoulder gently. "Sometimes mercy is as powerful as justice." Jasmine carried those words with her through the following days. She started allowing Danny longer visits, started letting him give Leo his breakfast, change his diapers, put him down for naps, started watching father and son together and seeing not the man who trapped her, but the man who was learning painfully and imperfectly to love without chains. Then the phone call came. Danny had traveled overseas for something he'd vaguely mentioned, tying up loose ends, he'd called it. Jasmine hadn't paid much attention, but the voice on the phone was crisp and professional. "Ms. Walker, there's been an accident. Mr. Smith was in a collision. You're listed as his emergency contact." The world tilted. "How bad?" "Critical. He's in surgery now. The prognosis is uncertain. Can you come?" Jasmine looked at Leo, playing with blocks on the floor, oblivious to the fact that his father might be dying on the other side of the world. Despite everything, the pain, the betrayal, the months of Cold War, Jasmine felt terror grip her throat. "I'm coming," she said. "I'm bringing our son, and I'm coming." The flight was endless. Leo slept against her chest, while Jasmine stared out at clouds, and tried not to imagine Danny dying alone. Tried not to think about all the things left unsaid, all the forgiveness withheld, all the chances she'd refused him while he was still alive to receive them. The hospital was sterile and foreign. A doctor with kind eyes met her in the waiting room. "Mr. Smith is stable but critical. The injuries are extensive. He's conscious now, but he's been asking for you. Delirious with pain medication, saying things that don't entirely make sense. Can I see him?" They led her to a room where Danny lay broken and bandaged, machines beeping around him. His eyes were closed, face pale beneath bruises and cuts. Jasmine approached the bed with Leo in her arms, and Danny's eyes fluttered open. "Jazz," he whispered, using a nickname he'd never used before. "You came." "Of course I came, you idiot," Jasmine's voice cracked. "What were you doing that got you nearly killed?" "Closing accounts. Transferring everything. Making sure you'd both be protected if—" Danny's breath hitched with pain. "If something happened to me. Wanted to make sure you'd never need anyone. Never be trapped again." Tears streamed down Jasmine's face. "You're not dying. Do you hear me? You don't get to die before I decide whether to forgive you." "Can't control that." Danny tried to smile and winced. "Finally something I can't control. Fitting, isn't it?" "Danny, let me say this, while I can." Danny's hand moved weakly toward her and she took it. "My wife died and it broke me. Made me afraid of loving anything because loss hurt too much. Then God, Jasmine, you made me feel human again. Made me want things. And I got so scared of losing that feeling that I tried to chain you to me. Tried to make your cage so pretty you wouldn't notice the bars. I noticed, Jasmine whispered. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. The manipulation, the lies, the control. Danny's eyes welled with tears. You were the one good thing I didn't deserve, and I crushed you trying to hold too tight. If I die today, I need you to know you were always free. In my head, in my heart, you were always free. I just didn't know how to let my hands catch up to what my heart knew. The machines started beeping erratically. Medical staff rushed in, pushing Jasmine back. He's coding. We need to get him to surgery now. They wheeled Danny away, and Jasmine stood in the empty room holding Leo, watching the love of her life, who she was supposed to hate, disappear through swinging doors. Leo reached toward where Danny had been and made a questioning sound. Dada's sick, Jasmine told him, voice breaking. But he's going to fight. He's going to come back to us. He has to. The waiting room became Jasmine's world. Hours stretched into days. She tried to hate Danny for so long, tried to amputate him from her heart like cutting out disease. But watching him hover between life and death made her realize the truth she'd been denying. She'd never stopped loving him. She'd just buried that love under layers of hurt and betrayal and righteous anger. Now, faced with the possibility of losing him forever, all those layers burned away. She loved him. Still loved him, maybe always would love him, despite everything. When Danny finally woke from surgery, stable but facing a long recovery, Jasmine was there. She'd been there for weeks, refusing to leave, letting Leo sleep in a makeshift bed while she kept vigil. Danny's eyes found hers immediately. You stayed. Did you think I'd leave? Jasmine moved closer, Leo stirring in her arms. Did you really think I'd walk away while you were fighting for your life? I hoped. Didn't dare believe. Danny's voice was weak but clear. Jasmine, I don't deserve... No, you don't, she interrupted. You don't deserve my presence or my vigil or my worry. But I'm not here because you deserve it. I'm here because she stopped, unable to finish. Because? Danny's eyes searched hers. Because Leo needs his father, Jasmine said quietly, the partial truth feeling safer than the whole one. But Danny heard what she didn't say, saw it in her face, her tears, the way she'd stayed for weeks when she could have left. Thank you, he whispered, for being here, for letting Leo see me, for not giving up completely. Don't thank me yet. Jasmine settled into the chair beside his bed. You have a long recovery ahead, and I'm not promising forgiveness or reconciliation or anything beyond this moment. But I won't leave you alone here. Not now. Danny's hand moved weakly across the sheets and Jasmine took it. They sat in silence, connected by that simple touch, while Leo slept between them. Outside the window, the city moved through its rhythms, oblivious to the small miracle happening in that hospital room. Two broken people choosing to sit in their brokenness together instead of apart. It wasn't healing. Not yet, but it was the first breath before a scream, the first light before dawn. It was the possibility that maybe, if they were both brave enough and patient enough and honest enough, they might find their way to something real, something not built on contracts and control, something built on choice. And for the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt something other than anger or despair. She felt the terrifying, fragile, dangerous ember of hope. Chapter 8. The Rehabilitation. The wheelchair arrival at the mansion felt like a funeral procession. Danny sat hunched in the chair, his body a broken architecture of casts and bandages, looking smaller than Jasmine had ever seen him. The man who'd commanded every room with his presence now couldn't stand without assistance. The man who'd built an empire through sheer will couldn't feed himself without his hands shaking. Jasmine had stayed through the worst of his recovery overseas, but returning here, to the place where their war had raged, felt like stepping back into a minefield. She'd arranged the main house for his disability, ramps installed, furniture reconfigured, a medical bed in what had been the study. The guest house was too difficult to navigate in his condition. You don't have to do this, Danny said, as she helped the nurses settle him. His voice was still weak, laced with pain medication. You could leave now. I'd understand. And who would care for you? Jasmine adjusted the pillows behind him with brisk efficiency. You just had spinal surgery. You can't even sit up alone. You're stuck with me. Lucky me, Danny said softly, and something in his tone made her hands still. The first weeks were clinical. Jasmine treated Danny like a patient, nothing more. She helped him with physical therapy exercises, administered medications on schedule, checked his vitals with detached professionalism. She kept Leo away during the worst moments, when Danny cried out during painful movements, when frustration made him throw things weakly, when depression painted his face grey as ash. But Leo, toddling and mobile as lightning, couldn't be completely contained. He'd toddle into Danny's room and climb onto the medical bed, patting his father's face with sticky hands and babbling in his private language. "Dada hurt?" Leo would ask, and Danny would smile through obvious pain. "Dada's getting better," he'd say. "For you, buddy. Getting better for you." Jasmine watched these moments from the doorway, her armor developing stress fractures. Danny was learning patience she'd never seen in him. Learning to accept help without controlling how it was given. Learning to be vulnerable without trying to manipulate his vulnerability into a weapon. One morning, she found him attempting to paint. He'd asked for art supplies, and she'd provided them with skepticism. Now he sat at an easel, his weakened hands gripping a brush, trying to create something from the chaos of his recovery. The painting was rough, childlike in its execution. But the subject was unmistakable. Leo. Danny was painting their son from memory, every stroke an act of love and determination, despite his body's limitations. "It's terrible," Danny said when he noticed her watching. "My hands won't do what my brain tells them anymore." "It's beautiful," Jasmine said honestly. "Leo will treasure it when he's older." "If I'm still here when he's older," Danny replied, not looking for pity but stating a fear. "The doctors said full recovery is possible. They also said possible doesn't mean certain." Jasmine moved into the room and sat in the chair beside his easel. "You're going to recover. You're too stubborn to do anything else." "Am I?" Danny set down the brush and turned his wheelchair to face her. "Because lying in that hospital bed, unable to move, completely helpless, I realized stubbornness isn't strength. It's fear wearing a different face. I've been stubborn my whole life, and it's cost me everything that matters." "So what are you instead?" Jasmine asked. "If not stubborn, trying to be teachable." Danny's eyes met hers with an honesty that hurt to witness. "Trying to learn that love means letting go, even when every instinct screams to hold tighter. Trying to become the man you deserved when you first walked into my office with nothing but desperation and hope." Jasmine swallowed hard. "Don't say things like that." "Why not? They're true." Danny's hand moved to his lap, still weak but steadier than before. "I'm in therapy, not just physical therapy, the real kind. The kind where I have to talk about my wife's death and my fear of abandonment and why I turned into a man who builds cages for the people he loves." "And what does your therapist say?" "That I have to choose to get better. That healing isn't something that happens to me, it's something I actively do every day, even when it's painful." Danny gestured to the painting. "This is me actively doing. Creating something instead of destroying, building instead of trapping, giving instead of taking." Jasmine looked at the painting of Leo, imperfect and sincere. She thought about Danny giving her space, moving to the guest house, sitting on cold stone steps, waiting for permission to see his own son. Thought about him nearly dying while trying to secure her freedom. Thought about weeks in a hospital where he'd been vulnerable and afraid, and she'd stayed. "I overheard your therapy session last week," she admitted. "The one where you talked about not knowing how to love without possessing." Danny's face colored. "That was private. Your door was open. I was walking past with Leo." Jasmine met his eyes. "Your therapist asked if you understood why I couldn't forgive you yet. Do you remember what you said?" "I said I didn't need her forgiveness to keep trying to deserve it eventually." Danny's voice was quiet. "I said loving someone means respecting their timeline, not demanding they heal on mine." "That's growth," Jasmine said softly. Real growth, Danny. It doesn't erase what I did. Danny turned back to his painting. Nothing erases it. I can only try to be better moving forward. That night, after Leo was asleep, Jasmine found herself returning to Danny's room. He was watching old videos of Leo on a tablet, his face soft with love and longing. "Can I watch with you?" she asked from the doorway. Danny's surprise was evident, but he nodded and made space beside his bed. Jasmine sat, and together they watched their son grow up in fast forward. Leo's first smile, first laugh, first time he rolled over, moments captured in pixels, memories preserved while they were busy destroying each other. "We've wasted so much time," Danny said, voice thick with emotion. "Time we can't get back." Maybe it wasn't wasted. Jasmine surprised herself with the words. Maybe we both needed to break completely before we could rebuild as something better. Danny looked at her, hope and fear warring in his expression. "Do you believe that? Or are you just being kind?" "I don't know yet," Jasmine admitted. "But I'm starting to think maybe forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. Maybe it's something you build piece by piece, day by day, like you're building your recovery. What if I mess up? What if I backslide into old habits?" Danny's vulnerability was naked on his face. "What if I can't maintain this growth?" "Then I'll tell you. And you'll work harder, and we'll try again." Jasmine reached out and took his weak hand in hers. "That's what commitment means, Danny. Not perfection, not never failing. Just agreeing to keep trying." Danny's hand tightened around hers, not possessively, not controlling, just holding. "I'm going to keep trying." "Every day, for as long as you'll let me." "Then I'll let you," Jasmine whispered. "One day at a time, Danny, that's all I can promise." But as she sat there, holding his hand and watching their son sleep on the screen, Jasmine felt the weight of her anger lifting fraction by fraction. Danny was becoming someone new, someone who understood that love without freedom wasn't love at all. And maybe, just maybe, she was becoming someone new too. Someone brave enough to risk her heart on a man who'd broken it. Someone strong enough to choose forgiveness, not because it was easy, but because it was right. The road ahead was long and uncertain, full of potential setbacks and painful memories. But for the first time since Leo's birth, Jasmine could imagine walking that road without her armor. Could imagine letting Danny walk beside her, not as her captor, but as her partner. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was something close. Something that felt like the first thaw after a brutal winter. And spring, she was learning, always came eventually, even to the coldest, most broken places. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. Danny's recovery progressed in inches that felt like miles. The wheelchair became a walker. The walker became a cane. The cane became a limp that physical therapy slowly erased. Jasmine watched him rebuild his body with the same determination he'd once applied to building cages. Except now he was building something else, proof that change was possible. They fell into routines that felt dangerously domestic. Morning coffee together while Leo smashed cereal around his high chair. Afternoon walks through the grounds, Danny leaning on his cane while Leo toddled between them. Evening story time, where Danny would read to Leo in voices that made their son shriek with laughter. But they never talked about the future, never discussed what came after Danny's recovery was complete. The question hung between them like smoke. What happens when he doesn't need me anymore? Jasmine felt it building, the decision point rushing toward them like a train they couldn't avoid. Danny was healing. Soon he'd be independent again. Soon, the medical necessity that kept them in proximity would evaporate, leaving only the choice: stay or go. The lawyer's arrival shattered their careful bubble. Danny called Jasmine into the study one afternoon, his face unreadable. Official documents spread across the desk like evidence at a trial. "I need you to sign these," Danny said, without preamble. Jasmine's stomach dropped. "What are they?" "Full parental rights, legal recognition of your maternity, joint custody arrangements that give you equal say in every decision about Leo's life, control of a trust fund in your name that you alone manage, enough money that you never need anything from me again." Danny pushed the papers toward her. Also, annulment papers for a marriage I had forged when you were unconscious after Leo's birth. I wanted legal control, so I created a fake marriage certificate. These papers dissolve it. The room spun. You, what? We were married? When? On paper only. While you were recovering from emergency surgery. I had documents forged to give me additional legal rights over you and Leo. Danny's face was granite, revealing nothing. It was the worst thing I did in a long list of terrible things. These papers undo it. Give you back your legal autonomy. Jasmine grabbed the edge of the desk for balance. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm healed enough. Strong enough. Danny stood, still leaning slightly on his cane, but mostly independent. You stayed because I was broken and helpless. Now I'm neither. So you're free. Sign those papers, and you have every right to walk out that door with Leo and never look back. That's what you want? Jasmine's voice came out strangled. You want me to leave? I want you to choose. Danny's carefully blank expression finally cracked, revealing devastation underneath. I want you to stay because you want to, not because you're trapped or because I'm pathetic and need care. I want you to look at your life and decide freely if I'm part of it. And if I choose to leave, then I'll move to the guest house permanently. You keep this house. I'll visit Leo according to whatever schedule you set. I'll show up and be a good father and never push for more than you're willing to give. Danny's voice roughened. I'll love you from a distance and try to be grateful for whatever scraps of time I get with my son. Jasmine stared at the papers. Everything she'd demanded, everything she'd fought for. Her freedom presented on silver platter with no strings attached. This was the dream she'd held on to through months of Cold War and silence. So why did it feel like a trap? What do you want, Danny? She asked quietly. Not what you think is right or fair or what you owe me. What do you actually want? Danny's face contorted with emotion. I want you to stay. I want to wake up every morning with you and Leo and build a life that isn't poisoned by my control. I want to prove every single day that I've changed, that I can love you without chains. His voice broke. I want you to forgive me, but I don't deserve it. Don't deserve you. So I'm giving you freedom instead, because that's what love actually means. Damn you, Jasmine whispered. Damn you for finally figuring that out now after everything. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry for all of it. Danny sagged against his desk. Sign the papers, Jasmine. Take your freedom. You've earned it 1,000 times over. Jasmine picked up the pen, looked at the signature lines, thought about her grandmother's words. That boy is loved. That's what matters. Thought about Danny, sitting on cold steps waiting for permission to see his son. Thought about him nearly dying while trying to secure her future. Thought about paintings with shaking hands and therapy sessions and choosing to break himself open instead of staying broken. She set down the pen. I can't. What? Danny's head snapped up. Why not? Jasmine, this is your chance. I know what it is, and I can't take it. Jasmine moved around the desk until she stood directly in front of him. Do you know what I've realized these past months? You're not the only one who was trapped. I trapped myself too. Trapped myself in anger and silence and righteous punishment. Trapped myself in the role of victim so completely I couldn't see when you stopped being my captor. Jasmine, let me finish. She took a shaking breath. You did terrible things, unforgivable things. You trapped me and lied to me and controlled me. You earned every bit of my hatred, but you also spent months proving you could change. Proving you could let go, and I've spent those same months punishing you for sins you'd already stopped committing. That's not you had every right to punish me. Maybe, but rights don't make actions healthy. Jasmine looked at this man who'd broken her and put her back together and broken himself, trying to fix what he'd damaged. I can't forgive you yet. Maybe not for years. Maybe some part of me never will completely. But I can't let you leave either. Can't let you move to the guest house and love us from a distance. Can't take this freedom knowing it means losing you. Danny's eyes welled with tears. You don't owe me. This isn't about owing. It's about choosing. Jasmine grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I'm choosing you, Danny. Not because you trapped me. Not because you need me. Not because of Leo, though God knows he needs both of us. I'm choosing you because somewhere in the middle of this nightmare, I fell in love with the man you're becoming. And I'm brave enough to risk my heart on the possibility that he's real. I'll mess up, Danny whispered. Ooh, I'll backslide. I'll have moments where the old instincts come back. Then I'll tell you, and you'll work harder, and we'll fight through it together instead of in silence. Jasmine's hands trembled against his face. That's what real love is, Danny, not perfection, not control. Just two broken people choosing each other every single day and doing the hard work of healing together. Danny pulled her into his arms, and Jasmine let herself be held, not possessed, not trapped, just held by someone who'd learned that love required open hands instead of fists. I don't deserve this, Danny said against her hair. Don't deserve your mercy. No, you don't. Jasmine pulled back to look at him. But I'm not offering mercy. I'm offering a chance. One chance to prove that the man I've watched emerge over these months is who you really are now. One chance to build something real instead of broken. What if I fail? Then I leave, and you don't get another chance. Jasmine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. But I don't think you'll fail, because I've watched you choose growth over comfort every single day. Watched you rebuild yourself cell by cell into someone capable of real love. And I believe in that person, Danny. Even when I don't want to, I believe in him. Danny kissed her then. Not the claiming kisses from the mountain estate, not the desperate grasps during their Cold War. This was different. This was a question he was asking with his lips, and she answered with her own. Yes, they were saying yes to each other, to the possibility of something real, to the terrifying work of building love from broken pieces. When they broke apart, Danny rested his forehead against hers. What do I do with these papers? Keep them. As a reminder, Jasmine stepped back. A reminder that my freedom is real and I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing us. And if you ever forget that, if you ever slip back into control, I have papers that let me walk away. Fair, Danny said roughly. More than fair. That night, Jasmine moved her things back into the master bedroom. Not because Danny demanded it, not because some contract required it, but because she chose to. Because sleeping beside him felt less like a cage and more like coming home. They lay in the darkness, not touching but aware of each other's presence. Leo slept in his nursery down the hall, safe and loved by two parents who'd finally figured out what that actually meant. I love you, Danny whispered into the darkness. I've loved you since that first night on the mountain, and I'll love you until I stop breathing. But I'll never trap you again, never try to chain you. You're free, Jasmine. You're free, and you're choosing me anyway. And that's the most precious gift I'll ever receive. I love you too, Jasmine whispered back, the words feeling like both surrender and victory. And I'm terrified, but I'm choosing this anyway, choosing you, choosing us. They fell asleep like that, speaking love into darkness, building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, full of potential pitfalls and painful memories, but they'd walk it together now, as equals, as partners, as two people brave enough to risk everything on the possibility of healing. And in the nursery down the hall, Leo dreamed peacefully, unaware that his parents had finally figured out how to love each other without destroying themselves in the process. Chapter 10. The Beginning. Time painted the house in colors Jasmine had never seen there before. Danny kept his promise with relentless consistency. The guest house remained his technical residence, a symbol that her freedom was real, but his presence wove through their days like golden thread. Present but never smothering, involved but never controlling, loving without possessing. They established rhythms that felt organic instead of forced. Family breakfasts where Leo would smash eggs into his hair while Danny made terrible pancakes, and Jasmine laughed at his culinary disasters. Afternoon walks through the gardens, Leo between them holding both their hands and demanding swing. Every few steps, Evening conversations after Leo's bedtime, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, talking about everything and nothing, slowly rebuilding trust, one word at a time. But nights remained separate. Jasmine slept in the master bedroom, Danny in the guest house. That line, they both understood, was the last frontier. The place where casual rebuilding became something else. Something they weren't quite ready to name yet. Until Leo's birthday approached, and with it, the weight of how far they'd actually traveled. Jasmine planned the party small, just the three of them. Cake and balloons, and the simple joy of celebrating their son. No extended family, no complicated dynamics, just them. The morning of Leo's birthday, Jasmine woke to find Danny in the kitchen, already cooking. Not the burnt attempts at pancakes, but something elaborate. French toast with strawberries, fresh squeezed orange juice, all of Leo's favorites prepared with obvious care. "You started without me," Jasmine said from the doorway. "Couldn't sleep. Wanted everything perfect." Danny plated the food with focused attention. "Today changed everything. I became a father. I watched you almost die. Everything changed." Jasmine moved into the kitchen, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. "It did change. We changed. You nearly died bringing him into this world." Danny's hands stilled on the plate. "And I've spent all this time terrified of losing either of you. Terrified enough to try to trap you. Terrified enough to push you away. Terrified enough that I broke everything good and had to rebuild from ash. Danny, I need to say this." He turned to face her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "These past months have been the best of my life. Better than anything before. Because they've been real, built on choice instead of control. And I'm grateful for every single day you've chosen to let me be part of this family." Jasmine felt her own tears building. "I'm grateful too. Grateful you became someone I could choose." Leo's shriek from upstairs interrupted them, the birthday boy demanding attention. They both laughed, the moment breaking gently. Danny wiped his eyes and plated Leo's special breakfast with a smile. The day was perfect in its simplicity. Leo opened presents with enthusiasm, more interested in the wrapping paper than the gifts. They decorated the house together, Danny lifting Leo to hang balloons, while Jasmine directed with amused authority. The cake was lopsided and covered in too much frosting, but Leo declared it best cake ever before smashing his face into it. As evening approached and Leo crashed from his sugar high, they put him to bed together. Danny read the story while Jasmine stroked Leo's hair. And when their son's breathing deepened into sleep, they stood together beside his crib, watching him dream. "He's perfect," Danny whispered. "Despite everything we put him through, despite all our brokenness, he's perfect. He's ours," Jasmine replied. "That's what makes him perfect." They moved to the living room, and Danny started gathering his things to return to the guest house. But Jasmine stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Stay," she said quietly. "Not in the guest house, here, tonight." Danny froze. "Jasmine, I'm not asking you to move back in permanently. I'm not saying everything is fixed. But tonight," she took a breath, steadying herself. "Tonight I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay with me, and tomorrow we can figure out what that means." Danny searched her face, and whatever he saw there made his expression soften into something that looked like wonder. "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified," Jasmine admitted. "But yes, I'm sure." They settled on the couch, the same place they'd had so many conversations. But this time, when Danny sat down, Jasmine curled into his side. His arm came around her cautiously, giving her space to retreat if needed. She didn't retreat. She settled deeper, breathing him in, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "Tell me something," Jasmine said after a while. "That first night on the mountain, after you held me and apologized. What were you apologizing for?" Danny was quiet for a long moment. "For taking something sacred and treating it like a transaction. For claiming your innocence when I should have treasured it. For being so broken, I couldn't see the gift you were offering until after I'd already damaged it." "I don't regret that night," Jasmine said softly. "I hated what came after, hated the control and the lies in the cage. But that night, she pressed her hand over his heart. That night you touched me like I mattered, like I was precious. I've held on to that version of you through all the darkness that followed. He's who I'm trying to become again, who I'm trying to be for you now. Danny's hand stroked her hair gently. The man who sees you clearly and loves what he sees without trying to own it. I forgive you, Jasmine whispered, and felt Danny's entire body go still. I forgive you, not for you, but for me, because holding this anger was another cage, and I'm choosing to walk out of it. I forgive you for the control and the lies and the pain. I forgive you because you've earned it by becoming someone worthy of forgiveness. Danny's arms tightened around her, and she felt his chest heave with silent sobs. I don't deserve it. I'll never deserve it. No, you don't, but love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. Jasmine lifted her head to look at him. And I'm choosing to try again, slowly, honestly, as equals this time. I'm choosing to love you despite everything, because of everything, because the man you've become is worth the risk. Danny cupped her face, thumbs wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Every single day, Jasmine. I'll prove it. I know you will, she said. But Danny, you've already proven it. These past months, watching you choose growth over comfort, watching you let go instead of hold tighter, you've already shown me the man you are now. He kissed her then, soft and questioning. She answered by deepening the kiss, pouring complicated emotion into that connection. When they broke apart, they were both crying and smiling simultaneously. They spent the night on the couch, wrapped around each other, talking until dawn about their hopes and fears and the life they wanted to build. Not the life Danny had tried to force. Not the life Jasmine had dreamed of before desperation walked her into his office. Something new, something real. Something built on choice and trust, and the hard-won understanding that love required open hands. As sunrise painted the windows gold, Jasmine wrote in her journal while Danny dozed beside her, "He broke me. I rebuilt myself. He broke himself. I watched. Now we're building something new, not from the ashes of what was, but from the truth of what is. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the hard work of loving someone who hurt you and choosing every day whether that love is worth the risk. Today I chose yes. Tomorrow I'll choose again. And the day after that I'll keep choosing until choosing him feels as natural as breathing. Because love isn't a destination. It's a daily practice. And we're finally learning how to practice it right." Leo padded into the living room, rubbing his eyes, clutching the stuffed bear Danny had given him. "Mama, Dada." "We're both here, sweetheart," Jasmine said, gathering him into her arms. Danny woke and pulled them both close, and they sat there as a family, imperfect, healing, real. Outside the windows, the world continued its rhythms. But inside this house that had been a prison and a battlefield, 3 people were learning what it meant to build a home. Not with contracts or control, not with cages disguised as love, but with choice and courage, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones where broken people figure out how to heal together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.